His first conversation with man involves sex. And then he gives man the freedom to choose. And what does Eve do in the garden? The one thing she's told not to do, Eve chooses to choose for herself what she wants, what's best for her. She takes of the fruit, she eats. It's pride. Oh, to be like God, to decide for myself. It's my body, it's my wants, it's my sexuality. I think that I should choose for myself. We choose to choose for ourselves, and it only dismantles us from that point forward. And this was so my story. It never started with like this egregious, I don't think anyone's chaste and pure and living faultless and then suddenly wakes up one morning and they're like 12 guys today, let's go. It doesn't usually go rogue except like freshman year, and we won't talk about that. But it is usually small choices, choosing to choose for ourselves what we want, what we think is best, what we like. This is how my story started. I remember going down to my mom's little red love seat in her bedroom when I was 9. And listen, don't Google this. No one knows the answer. But I was assigned a project, one of those 3 try posters. None? No one? Okay. Well, it used to be this thing. And so we had to do this project, and my assignment was on snakes. And it was time to do a little piece on the reproductive system. And no one knows how snakes have sex. It's a great mystery of the universe. There was no Google really at that time. I was 9. I didn't know how to work a computer. So I went downstairs to my mom to ask her how snakes had sex. And I'm sure my poor mom was completely caught off guard because the phrases and the terms I was using probably stunned her. Because what she didn't realize was that prior to that moment, and mind you, I was only 9, I had had an older neighbor take me down to the fort by the creek in our neighborhood and tell me everything they knew about sex. Natalie, I didn't ask, but I got debriefed in great detail. And some of us have that story, and if it wasn't the friend that dragged us somewhere and opened up porn, it was the uncle or the cousin, or it was the abuse or the molestation or what we stumbled in on or any number of things. My heart grieves for the current generation coming up who can hit a wrong hashtag and suddenly be inundated. But she didn't realize Natalie had already told me a lot of very perverse things, and she also didn't realize that earlier that year too, I had opened the truck door of my dad's little silver truck and a playing card had fallen out from these wads of trash, basically, that he always kept behind the seats. And I bent down to pick up this playing card and went to shove it back in the truck, and I turned it over, and it was a novelty poker card. It was porn. And I remember at 9 years old sitting and looking at this, and I had no idea what I was seeing, but it seared something onto me. The innocence of a child that knows right from wrong many times. And this wasn't my daddy, and this wasn't my mommy, and my mommy was in the house, and why was this my daddy's, and what was this? And I was overwhelmed and felt like I was going to puke, like my stomach was just coming out of my throat. I will never forget how hard my heart was pounding. And I shoved this back into the truck, and I got up in the passenger seat, and then jumped in my dad, and I was very much a daddy's girl. And I sat there in the passenger seat just overwhelmed. And many of you know the first time you came across porn, that it seared something on you. And it started as kind of this shame and this embarrassment, but then what happens? That weird feeling kind of turns into intrigue and curiosity, and what was that? And why did that make me feel some kind of way? And what did I even see? And why do I keep thinking about it? It's like a siren on the cliffs that calls out to you. It's one of the enemy's greatest tactics against the children of God. How easy and accessible to sit back anonymously. And I remember starting to seek out porn, 9 years old. Y'all, in 2016, in 1 year, one calendar year, on one pornographic website, and there are hundreds of thousands, 1 year on one website, we as a people consumed 4.6 billion hours of porn. That is 524,000 years. Or 17,000 complete lifetimes of porn consumed in 1 year on one website. That's just unsaved males contributing to that statistic, I'm sure of it. Give me a break. Porn's affecting men, porn's affecting women, porn's affecting children. The average age of exposure right now is 9 years old. That's the average. That means there's younger. Well, I'm a grown man and I'm 22 and I'm in college. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It has a grip on you and you are enslaved to it if you can't stop it the moment Christ says no more. We are gluttonous and we are addicted and we are overwhelmed. And I wrestled with a pornography addiction for 10 years. And what happens is what we set before our eyes kind of frames the way we start to think and changes our heart a bit, and our actions start to overflow. And really, I even rationalize, well, I'm watching this to learn a thing or two, because what happened was on that couch with my mom, when I asked her about sex and she was overwhelmed, she set me down and she started explaining, now, honey, what God intends is that we would be virgins until we're married, and I was a virgin and your father was a virgin. And I'm sure she had more to say, but I was very theatrical, if you can't tell. And I remember cutting her off and saying, then mother, I too will be a virgin when I marry. And I triumphantly marched out of the room. And she's like, oh, dear God. But I remember I had made this virginity vow, right? The good Christians are supposed to, right? And the promise ring. And we have made these vain virginity vows and focused solely on virginity, but missed the greater call that God is summoning his children to, of purity, purity of heart, of mind, of actions, of thoughts. But when it's just a virginity, it quickly becomes the do this, don't do that. Okay, so then like how far is too far, right? It's like I'm a virgin, I can still say I'm like the Christian virgin, and that's so amazing, and I'm so incredible, and we're so self-righteous. And yet I'm addicted to porn behind closed doors. I'm starting to push the envelope as far as I can with people. Goodness, 14 years old, 17 or 18-year-old senior, was a freshman, parked next to a construction site. I mean, talk about romance, right? It was my body, my wants, my thoughts, my choices. My parents thought the church was talking to me about it. The church thought my parents were talking to me about it. Nobody was talking to me about it except the world that had a lot to say about it. Does this narrative sound familiar to anybody? And so I'm waving my vain virgin banner, and yet I'm a mess behind closed doors, completely impure, struggling in so many ways. Then my dad put a gun to his heart and pulled the trigger. And if you want to talk about something that will compel you into sexual brokenness, it's just any piece of adversity in your life. Because that physical fix could like distract us for a little bit, right? Or numb the pain, right? And I'm giving away my body in hopes, desperate hopes, that somebody will give me their heart. We just want to be seen and known and loved and desired. I remember waking up after a drunken night. These are my BC, before Christ days. Waking up in college and replaying the night in my mind, like totally hungover and like rehashing and thinking through what happened and who was that. And suddenly it was like I sobered up in a millisecond and I thought, wait a second. Who was that guy that joined our group at like the beginning of the night? And what had they said about him? What was his name? And I ended up with him in the kitchen at the end of the night. But had they said at the beginning that he was married? Or that he was divorced? Or was he separated? Am I an adulteress? Have I been involved now with a married man? Now Christ would say there's adultery all over our story if we even look at another with lust. But had I physically also carried out adultery? I am the all-American, well-achieving, best at faking, Christian, Christ-following, great grades girl on the surface, and yet behind closed doors, I'm an adulteress. I'm addicted to pornography. I can't say no to anything. I'm completely overwhelmed. How have I fallen so far? And we want to lead so bad. But something is so off in our hearts when sexual sin is at play. And the enemy loves it, that you can't quit it. He loves that he can keep you distracted and consumed and ashamed and overwhelmed.